Yeah, and I think it because it's built on blockchain technology. One, like you said, you can audit it and you can track all the transactions. And the other thing that's pretty interesting about it is that you can anybody that buys some of this crypto equity, the company can automatically be paying out like dividends.
Yeah,
which is a pretty cool use.
Exactly. There was a quick story. There was a company called Satoshi Dice, 2011. 2012, it was a gambling site online where people would go on, use Bitcoin to gamble. And this guy took his company public, IPO'd his company on the Bitcoin blockchain, issued shares to totally anonymous to people for Bitcoin. And he then paid dividends on those shares to those shareholders. And then the company was acquired by a private buyer about 9 months later for $12 million. And all those shareholders were paid a premium above their IPO price. So all that was done on blockchain without the oversight of the SEC, without any banks involved, without any middlemen involved, and entirely anonymous. So that was early in Bitcoin, and that has already happened. So that's the level of disruption that's taking place.
Right, and that's awesome because the people that invested and helped build up Satoshi Dice got more of a reward or a bigger piece of the acquisition than they would if they were using middlemen.
Yeah, and he also, if you're running a gambling site, how can you IPO your company to people you don't know? Well, Bitcoin allows you to do that securely so that you can't defraud people, essentially.
Right, and I guess, so something like Kickstarter, which is like, I'm going to do this project, I need to raise this amount of money, and then I'm going to go do it. Maybe you'll get a t-shirt out of it. This is more, you actually kind of own this thing that's alive. And you could even, can you sell that? Could you trade that?
So those are being built as well eventually. Stock markets for shares of those type of companies. That's the next level. So all that is in the pipeline of development. And that's what gets me so excited is you're talking about reinventing entire industries, moving existing industries onto blockchain, using blockchain technology. So stock markets on the blockchain, Kickstarter, as we just talked about, on the blockchain, assets on the blockchain.
Is that happening already?
It's still early, but it is happening. There's a few. For example, a deed to a house can be put on the blockchain and traded so you can verify who owns that house just from looking up on the blockchain. So you remove the need for any record keeping, which is a big deal.
Or paper.
Yeah.
Which is like the government's main way of tracking things right now.
Yeah. So there's
which is horrible.
Yeah, it's the government actually would love Bitcoin because everything's traceable.
Yeah, and they're still trying to decide how they feel about it. But we would like the government to use blockchain for all their records.
Yes, and then we can verify all their records.
Right, and so hopefully, that probably falls into like something that's not happening now, but like what could happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I know we're really excited about. Even less of like what's happening now, and more excited about like what could happen. What is blockchain going to do to the world in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 50 years? Right. Maybe the U.S. government is totally using blockchain technology in some amount of time.
Yeah.
Like what else do you think we could see happen? Like how could blockchain, the Bitcoin technology, kind of impact the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the reason why I'm so excited about Bitcoin and why it keeps me up at night and I think about it all the time is because there's not just one place of disruption for Bitcoin. It has such a variety of different applications. So you asked, going forward, one really interesting use case for Bitcoin is in stock markets. I think Patrick Byrne, who's the CEO of Overstock, has published and already has a team working on creating the first publicly traded crypto equity. It's a fancy way of saying his company, Overstock, that it trades on NASDAQ.
Which was one of the first companies to start accepting Bitcoin.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that was early, like January this year.
Yep.
And he wants to issue a share of overstock using the blockchain. And so if that happens, you could see entire stock markets moving over onto a blockchain infrastructure so that all trades are done, they're already done electronically, but verifiable,
Right.
audit trails, everything. You can't naked short sell, which is a big problem that Patrick has talked about a lot. And so that's what, plus you remove a lot of the middlemen involved. For example, in the stock market today, somebody owns the asset. Say I buy a stock. I own the stock, but somebody else is doing the exchange. Somebody else is taking it from someone else and selling it to me. Somebody else is actually holding the asset.
Like Scott Trade,
Yeah.
for example. Right?
There's even more parties involved. There's a custodian. So I own it, but somebody else is holding it, and then another party is exchanging it. And then the banks are involved. It's just there's so many middlemen involved.
Which, when you compare that to Bitcoin, that sounds way more complicated.
Yeah, that's the thing. Nobody understands the banking system, nor the stock market system.
Yeah.
So to say we don't understand Bitcoin, therefore it's not good, is also, I think, a fallacy.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what we were talking about before. It's like most people will probably never fully understand how Bitcoin technology works, but most people also don't understand how they have electricity in their house, and they use that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. There's so many things people don't understand. People don't understand email, but we don't need to understand email. It just works.
Right.
So actually, my opinion of Bitcoin going forward is that it does become a invisible technology where you're using it. Sure, you can say I use Bitcoin, but you don't need to know how it works. It just does what you want it to do.
Right. Like, I don't know what programming languages Facebook's built on top of.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Yeah. Cool. What else is there? There's got to be a lot of other things.
So micropayments are something that can be a really interesting use case. There's something called the Dogecoin tip bot. So Dogecoin, just quickly, is just another version of Bitcoin. It's just called Dogecoin.
It's actually awesome. So you guys may have heard of Dogecoin. Dogecoin is like Bitcoin, but instead of a bee, it's a face of a Shiba Inu, which is like a really cute puppy.
Yeah. So Dogecoin is awesome. I mean, there's way more Dogecoin that will ever be created. So people are owning 10,000 Dogecoin at a time. And what's interesting is this has caused a lot of people to give them away and spend them actually almost more than Bitcoin.
Well, that sounds like a lot, too. Like
10,000 Dogecoin, yeah.
Like, you got 10,000 of anything. Like,
right, exactly. Instead of having 0.001 Bitcoin or 0.01 Bitcoin.
Right, which just makes me feel bad.
Right, yeah. So it's a decimal thing. But anyway, with the Dogecoin tip bot, you can tip Redditors for their comments. But what's a really interesting use case of that is if you're an author or you're a blogger and you put up a blog post, you could monetize those blog posts through tips, for example. So you don't have to take anyone's, for $1 or for 50 cents, I'm not going to give my credit card information. It's just too big a barrier to entry. But you put a Bitcoin address or eventually just a button, because you have your Coinbase wallet running in the background, you just send 50 cents like that entirely for free. So that's a use case that can exist today, because just to do that credit card transaction costs 30, 40, 50 cents initially before you even take a percentage.
Right, so if I wanted to send you 3 cents, because I was like, oh, that was an excellent blog post, I'm going to send you 3 cents.
You're going to send me 3 cents, but the merchant, me, the author, I'm going to be paying 50 cents just to receive the 3 cents. So
that sounds horrible.
Yeah, it can't work.
One more point for Bitcoin.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So what about, like, with Bitcoin, we're tracking transactions. Multi-sig, we're protecting transactions, pretty much, right? Making it harder to hack. Saving assets, that's super cool, being able to track that. At some point, maybe the government, U.S. government, whoever, using blockchain to track other types of information. Like, what other types of information can you save information on the blockchain? And, like, how does that work? And because that's probably something most people don't really understand, is that there's actually space on the coin, in the ledger to save other information. Right. And then that becomes part of this decentralized trusted system, and
Mm-hmm.
anybody can audit it to make sure that information is there.
Yeah. So one example of that is back to the deed version. So you could take a deed to a house and you could put it on the blockchain, which is a fancy way of just this portion of a Bitcoin is marked that it's this deed. So because it's on the blockchain, it can't be copied, and you then send that token, that deed, around using the blockchain, so that whoever owns that owns the deed.
Whoever owns that Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right.
For example.
Right. So it's almost like if a Bitcoin was a physical object like the dollar,
Mhm.
it's like you're literally writing out the deed on the dollar,
Sure.
kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. That's fine.
like in simple terms.
And whoever owns the thing is, you could copy that dollar.
Right. Which is why we don't want to use dollars anymore. But
Actually, we're already 93% of all money is already digital.
Yep.
I have to verify that stat, but yeah, it's a very small percentage is still cash. And the government is constantly trying to remove cash, because cash makes up a really large portion of the illicit activity that goes on. Whereas Bitcoin, it's all traceable.
Right. So, are you excited about where Bitcoin can go?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pumped.
Cool.
It's basically, I love Mark Andreessen's writing on Bitcoin. He's probably the guy that got me most excited about it. And he says this is the single greatest technological innovation he's seen since the internet. Because you're basically creating an entirely new platform for money. And never before has that ever been possible. The fintech industry, finance innovation, has largely been, the growth has been hindered because of all the regulation and because of the big monopolies and oligopolies that exist. So now you have a decentralized platform that is allowing people like myself, people like the hackers at Boost, to build new applications using this technology for money. I mean, that's why you're seeing so much innovation, so much venture capital money going in. You're disrupting a whole industry. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Well, thank you for helping us explain this to the world. I'm sure they're super appreciative because this stuff is complicated. It's hard to figure out how it works, and it's actually awesome if you get a chance to understand it. So
happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. All right, bye guys.